Hi there. I'm Danny Gregory, and thanks for joining me to draw with me. It is a fun thing to do, and I'm glad that you're here with me to do it. With me. Draw with me, that is. So, draw with me. If you don't know what draw with me is, let me explain. Draw with me is a tradition. It's a tradition that now goes back, many months, goes back actually over a year. So I've been doing Draw With Me's on Thursdays at noon Eastern Standard Time for, I don't know, I think it was since April of 2019. Do you remember 2019? How wonderful that time was? Yes, that's when we started doing these. And since then, I continued to do it until March of this year, when we began, we put Draw With Me on hold, and we instead switched to a thing called Live Drawing Party because we felt the need for a party. Understandable. So the live drawing party started in on March 18th of this year, and we held 47, if you can believe it, live drawing parties, and they were really fun. We met originally every day, and then eventually we met on Instagram as well as here and on YouTube. It was really fun, and we made a lot of stuff. And thank you all who were part of it. And now we're going back to ye old tradition of Thursday Draw With Me. But I thought it would be cool to, for those of you who are new to Draw With Me or new to the live drawing party, such as it was, I thought it would be fun to kind of recap what we did in the live drawing party, because a lot of the subjects and the things that we made were the kinds of things that we'll probably do on Draw With Me. Draw With Me is just an opportunity to get together and draw. You can draw what I draw, or you can draw whatever you choose. It doesn't really matter. You can draw, you can paint, you can weave, you can carve, you can whatever you want. But just make some stuff and let's hang out, okay? I see a lot of folks are showing up. Magdalena from Geneva, and Connie from Collierville, and lots of other folks. So it's really nice to see you all here. But let me begin continue by bringing up this. Some of you might remember this. This is one of the live drawing party projects that we did. It was making paper bag masks that represented how we were feeling, and then taking photographs of them, and that was a lot of fun. But this bag has become my kind of portfolio of all the things that we did on the various live drawing parties. So let me show you what some of those were. Hold on one second. Here we go. Yeah, this is, hold on, come on, you can do it. There we go. This is one of the first ones that we did. This was just drawing weird shapes with different colors and then kind of turning them into something. So that was, I think, the very first live drawing party that we did. This was a blind selfie. Not drawing yourself as if you were blind, but drawing yourself without looking at the paper. That was one of the things. This is a fun project, which was to draw little squares, and then we did time drawings of whatever we saw, 2 minutes. So each of these drawings, I think, was 2 minutes. And then we went back in and put in a spot color. But yeah, so that represents 18 minutes, 9 drawings, knocked them out. This was, I don't know if you remember this thing, but we drew a car, drew it over and over in different lengths of time. So this is when it took 3 minutes, as you can see down here. It took 3 minutes to draw that car. It took 5 minutes to draw that car. 30 seconds. Just kind of drawing the same thing over and over again and refining it until we got down to this one, a 5-second car. That was a lot of fun too. This is drawing with a fat pen and a thin pen, drawing our various appendages. So that was kind of cool. What else do we have? Yeah, this is another one like that, where I drew this shoe, and I drew it with a fat pen and a thin pen and some colored pencils, and just kind of did a study of a humble shoe. This one is a drawing of some cereal in a bowl. We were also talking about drawing toast, and this became kind of an object, sort of a meditative opportunity to just kind of look at something kind of complicated and to study it. Um, what was this one? I don't remember this one specifically. I think it had to do with using different colors to represent things that were further away. So kind of like more details here. That was pretty cool. This was a crumpled up piece of paper. Right? I think it was a page out of a magazine or something like that. And we drew that and kind of did some cross hatching and just kind of turned it into an abstraction. That was pretty cool. Here, for some reason, I wrote down some notes next to this drawing of a. This is a limited palette drawing with just three colors that we did. This dog, honestly, I don't really remember drawing him at all, or why. Usually, I do remember my drawings really well, but yeah, I like that drawing. Anyway, this we drew sheep. We watched a video of sheep moving around. Drew that. That was drawing with ink. This was just last week. And so is this. Drawing a glass. Let me show you these. Because I did a lot of drawings on the iPad, actually. Let me see. This is not where I want to start, though. We drew here. Yeah, this is one of the first ones I did. This is me sort of looking a bit bewildered and, yeah, wearing gloves. That was before we all wore masks. We were still just wearing gloves compulsively. This is just objects in the kitchen we drew. This is just simple drawings. And that's a more complicated drawing of one of my closest friends. And this is we were drawing old mug shots. And that was what a couple of these were, just some mug shots. This is kind of doing this is a kind of day in the life sort of thing. It was just like objects around nearby and just trying to draw them simply. And I think these are all the things that are on the table and just making a kind of a journal page out of that. This is a drawing I did of my shoes that kind of evoked the emotion of being incarcerated, as long as we have been. A lot of selfies. Every week we were drawing selfies, and I was drawing them virtually every day. I mean, I think this will be probably my best record of this time. Is all these weird and bewildered and unhappy and contemplative and kind of beaten up looking selfies. Yep, did a lot of them. Kind of my favorite subject. Yep, here we go. A lot of them. This is a thing that we did about how to teach anybody to draw anything, and it began with using these very kind of cartoony images because we were working on portraits at the time, and that was fun. And this was when we watched the Jazz at Lincoln Center gala, and we drew musicians who were performing. And this was my attempt to paint along with Bob Ross. And this is what we watched a video about Tommy Kane drawing, my friend Tommy Kane, the artist, and we just drew from the video. So it was kind of an attempt to, get used to drawing from TV, drawing from movies, stuff like that too. And yeah, this is drawing an eye kind of intensively because we were talking about the upcoming workshop that we're doing with Frantz Van Stone, which is coming up in about 10 days or less. And this is one of the last ones that I did, which was I began kind of doing some sketches of my son's dog, Penny. And I'm not sure what that is. I just found it in the file. So, all right. So that was fun. So we've made a lot of stuff. We were pretty busy during this time, Not that busyness is necessarily a virtue. I don't want to overstate that. But it was fun. It was good to be productive. It was good to be together. And yeah, if you want to watch any of those, and as I said, there's a lot of them, and there's also a lot that Kosha made on Instagram. They're all on the Live Drawing Parties playlist on this channel, so you can check them out anytime. If you have a spare, I would say this is 24 hours worth of videos that we made. It might actually be more because some of them were up to an hour long. Yeah, this is more than a full 24-hour festival you could have with yourself. So today we're going to draw a chair. Haven't drawn a chair in a while, and I've been thinking about doing a series of drawing all of the chairs in this house that we have been staying in since the quarantine began. It just feels like, we spend a lot of time sitting around. Been trying to exercise and, swim and go on walks, but we've been spending a lot of time sitting in chairs, and there are different chairs in different parts of the house, inside and outside. And I'm thinking of doing a series of just drawing those. So that's coming up. We'll see when and how that begins and happens. So let's move on to doing the drawing of a chair. Let us move on to that. So grab yourself some paper. I've got some paper here, and I've got a chair here. I'm not going to show you the chair because you don't need to see my chair. Draw your own chair. If you don't have a chair, get up and draw the chair you're sitting on. Why not? And we will see what happens with that. I'm going to have to switch one thing here. Okay, good. So, sorry, there we go. And I can get rid of that. And I can go back to this. There we go. So I'm going to be just drawing this chair. Chairs are interesting because they are relatively simple, but they're also three-dimensional, and that adds some interest to them. And they also have, negative space, which is always an interesting thing to consider. Negative space. So we have that in the offing as well. So get your pen, get your paper, get your chair, put it at a nice angle. You don't want to draw it just in profile. Push mine away a little bit so I can see it. And I like to start drawing chairs, kind of start anywhere. It doesn't really matter. I think I'm going to start in between. I'm going to start by drawing negative space. And I'm drawing. This is a kind of an elaborate and carved chair. So it has a lot of interesting parts to it, which makes for a nice drawing. Feel free to correct as you go. Sometimes we make mistakes. Mistakes are fine. Mistakes are allowed. In fact, mistakes are often encouraged. Why? Because mistakes are our friends. Mistakes are our teachers. They are there to show us how to get better. And so we don't fear them. We don't yell at them. We don't use them to beat ourselves with. Instead, we embrace them and ask them, thank you. What else can you teach me? That is, I would say, if there is a motto for Draw With Me, it is screw up with me. Maybe not screw up, but, learn with me. Let's put it that way. That's a bit more diplomatic, right? Learn with me. And it's interesting. I'm already a little bit lost with this chair. It's as I said, it's a fairly simple object, but it is three-dimensional, and so I need to kind of come back to this contour drawing that I'm doing. And let me zoom in a bit so you can see more clearly. So this is the front of the chair, looking down on it. And This is one of those drawings where I might end up not really drawing the whole thing. So what I'm doing now is I am just measuring. So I'm measuring this, and I'm seeing that it's about that. It's a good thing to do, is to kind of start measuring your proportions as you go, because this is a line that's very straight, obviously. And I have no idea how long it is relative to other things because it doesn't have landmarks that break it up. But that's cool. We can figure things out by measuring stuff, and by looking at what we're intersecting, and like for instance, how like this thing and this thing are basically the same length. I'm discovering. So now I'm going to come back up here, and I'm going to connect these things here, and in this part. Yeah, I'm going to get a little lost here. Okay, so this is there, and then this part comes across, and then this part goes straight down, and that part goes down there. This goes back. Yeah, so this is a little wonky here, but that's okay. And then there's kind of round bits here. It's good to have a conversation with yourself as you're doing it, just to say, oh yeah, what am I figuring out as I'm going? Let me just talk to myself. It's not a conversation that anybody else would be particularly interested in hearing. So excuse me if I'm boring you, but this is kind of part of my process, which is to say, all right, I want to really direct myself as I go. So, and I jump back and forth. I'm not necessarily, it's not like I necessarily have a super defined process. That's okay. I work on something and then I say, okay, that part needs some attention back here. So I'll go back and work on it some more, and kind of come in here, see that this is curved like that. I already know that I made one fairly grievous error quite early on, which is I did not make this part long enough, but so my whole chair is gonna have, I was gonna say suffer from that poor decision, but actually instead I'm going to say is going to proudly bear the scars of my inattention, and that's cool. So yes, so it is a proud survivor of this terrible thing that I've done to it. And the way I'm looking at this chair is I'm less interested right now in its, what I would say, chairness. It's the thing that makes it a chair. I'm more interested in looking at it as kind of a landscape. So I notice that this line is parallel with this line, and this line is actually, there's another line here behind it, and then this line is actually here. And see, this is where negative space comes in, because you look at this negative space here of this piece, and then I look at the negative space of this shape here, right? So I say, okay, that is, what is that? Is it a God, it's been so long since I studied, is it geometry? I can't remember what it is. Geometry, let's say, where you learn the names of these different shapes. Any math teachers out there who could aid, or former math students? What is it called when you have, it's when the two sides are, when this side is parallel to this side, but this side is not. Anyway, I forget what it's called, but that's what that shape is, and that's what the negative space is telling me. And it's also interesting to look at a line like that and a line like that. Very easy to Quadrangle. Yes, quadrangle, my wife just shouted. She's a former math student, I guess. I don't know. Didn't know her when she was a math student, but so yeah. So these are the language. You kind of come up with your own language, I think, for yourself when you're drawing. And it's interesting when I work with artists who are doing demonstrations. They it's interesting to hear them speak aloud as they're working and to say, okay, that's what their version of that language is. Like it's different. It's as if you were talking to a dog or something. Um, so this line and this line are going to be sort of parallel. Is that correct? I didn't do it correctly. It's more or less like that. So yeah. But actually, I'm noticing that this chair actually arcs back. It arcs back there. It isn't completely square. The seat, it's sort of, the back of it is slightly narrower than the front. So yeah, so those are things one has to think about as you're drawing. And so yes, you develop this language and you start to say that yourself, okay, I noticed this and I noticed that. Like, so for instance, I noticed that this bar that comes up here that's supporting the back of the chair, that is going to be parallel to this, right? It's going to be the same line. It is, but it's a different angle. So this comes up like that, and then this goes up like that, sort of. So yeah, I'm not going to worry about it too much because I've already made some decisions that were not quite on. So therefore, it's almost like two wrongs do not make a right, because it's better, in fact, to have, well, maybe two wrongs do make a right. Yeah, two wrongs do make a right, because in some ways, once you have made one mistake, you kind of want to make other mistakes that are sort of going to balance it out, because otherwise you'll end up with, things that are going to make the mistakes stand out even more somehow. So when it comes to the rungs of the chair, you also obviously want to make sure that you add the right number of rungs, and that you are not just kind of randomly putting up a bunch of lines there. So this chair has, and also, of course, that you want, see, this is difficult here because, I'm sorry, you can't even see what I'm doing. This is difficult because this here is negative space, but this is actually the rung of the chair. It's wood, but it looks the same because it's the same quality of a line. And then this is the next rung. And because I've kind of made the decision that I'm not really going to get into shading these things, I'm just doing basically a contour drawing. I just have to make sure that I can keep track of what these different things are. So, I'm also filled with regret about a couple of these lines because they're not quite looking right. But I think one of the decisions that I try to make in my drawings is to keep my line. See, this kind of a line where I've rethought it through over and over again, and I've approximated it, and I've said, like, let me sketch my way through it. I don't like that, because honestly, all I've done here is be a coward. I've just decided that, you know what, probably one of these 75 lines in here is correct. However, I'm not really willing to say which one. So yeah, so that's not good. That is not good. So it's better to do something like this line, where it's just boom. Not quite sure if it's right or not, but then when you get this kind of thing, and I'm reappraising it, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather not make it obvious. Well, that's not true. I was going to say I would rather not make it obvious that I made these errors, but I don't actually mind the errors. I don't mind if I made an error and then I went back in and fixed it. What I don't like is when I'm incapable of making a commitment to a line, and so therefore I make a whole bunch of them. I also didn't think terribly well about this drawing before I did it, so I'm sort of at the limits of the piece of paper, but I don't mind that actually because, first of all, it doesn't really matter what the whole structure of this is on the page because it's not like I'm doing anything with it. I'm just using it to study this chair with. But, you know, it's... And then these lines are also, as you can see, the line quality has changed. It's in part because of this pen, which is a little bit flexible, but I prefer to have all my lines in this kind of a drawing be of the same kind of, importance, emphasis. So yeah. So, Magdalena is very encouraging, and I appreciate that she says that this makes it seem like it was a composition. Okay, it was a composition because honestly, the thing that I was most interested in with this chair were these negative spaces. That was really what this drawing was about. It's about this piece of floor here, this bit in here, this bit in here. Those are actually more interesting to me than to draw every single one of these rungs. And then this seat is pretty boring. It's just a kind of a beige piece of upholstery. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on that. I mean, you could theoretically put in a bunch of texture in there, but why bother? I think this is ultimately about these legs and about these, the things that were most interesting to me, which is these sort of the curves that were kind of made up this thing. But again, a little wonky, but there it is. Let me just get rid of these other pieces of paper because they're distracting. And so yeah, I mean, what I like about this kind of a drawing is if this was a sketchbook page, it isn't. This is just on a regular piece of paper. But if it was, I might, for instance, put some kind of an edge to it, and I might do something like that. So I'm sort of emphasizing these negative spaces. And then I might write something here. I might write something on this chair. I might write something across here about it, or I might just write, a couple of words. Like this particular chair is my enemy. And I'll tell you why. We spent a lot of time, my wife Jenny and I, sitting in these dining room chairs when we first moved to this house a few months ago. We didn't have any proper desk chairs, so we were spending an enormous amount of time sitting in these straight-backed wooden chairs that were really designed to allow you to have dinner and to make sure that your guests don't overstay their welcome. So comfortable for a little while, but then if you hang out for a little bit, you start to say, okay, I think it's time I have to go home now because I'm starting to get uncomfortable. Not because of the conversation, but because of the furniture. So yeah. So, so I'm going to write a little story about that. I'm not going to do it now, but I'm going to write a little story about how uncomfortable these chairs are and how, I mean, literally to the point that we both were hobbling around with enormous amounts of back pain from sitting in these stupid chairs. So, yeah, so I, maybe that's affected my drawing of this chair in some way, my dislike of it. I mean, it's not a bad looking chair, but it is certainly not comfortable. And I'm sitting in one of them right now, and I can't wait for this entire thing to be over with. Not really, I'm joking. I like doing this, but I am looking forward to getting up because we did finally order a couple of desk chairs, proper bona fide desk chairs, and they are a completely different story to sit in those. So anyway, lesson being, what's the lesson? get a good chair. What's this? Oh, yes, that's not me. Here we go. That's me. So, yeah, that was fun. Have you guys been enjoying yourselves? Let me just lubricate the mechanism. So, yes, Jen brings up a good point. I wonder if Van Gogh's chair is the most famous chair in a painting. Might be. For some reason, I was thinking about the artist Jim Dine, who is most famous for painting bathrobes, but for some reason, I feel like he painted chairs as well. But yeah, I bet you that is. I mean, that yellow chair in the yellow room, and certainly Van Gogh is much more famous than but that drawing is actually, it's kind of like a woven chair. That the painting of Van Gogh's chair, it's kind of woven raffia seat, right? It's kind of knobbly like this chair is, probably hand carved or something, some peasanty chair. But yeah, that's true. Let's see. Karen says, funny that Danny's comment about running talk while drawing. I did that as a kid. My mom would find me drawing, chatting away to myself, sometimes in dialogue with some imaginary person. I have to say, I like to talk, as you might have figured out. And my wife doesn't always necessarily want to hear me talking. And the fact is, there's just two of us in this, white collar prison that we're in. So I do talk to myself. I'll go out in the garden and have conversations with myself. And I remembered as a kid, like, playing characters and talking to myself. There's something about that process. It's very freeing, like doing voices and talking like that and playing different kinds of people and playing like a great pirate swashbuckler, whatever it is, doing those kinds of things. It's something I think that gets me back in touch with that kind of funner, more playful part of me. And that's nice. I think that is part of the fun of making art, right? So, yeah. So feel free to talk to yourself, and if people look at you, I don't know, you're the crazy artist, right? Maybe that's why artists are crazy. So, what else? Joni says that she liked my series when I reviewed art books. Yes, that is a series that I did called Sketchbook Club. It wasn't really art books. It was reproductions or recreations, republications of artists' sketchbooks. If you've never looked at that series, I loved it too. And I did, 25 or 30 of those things. And now I'm nowhere near my library of sketchbooks. So I should go back and look at some of those because they were really fun to do. Every episode, I would just pull out some, because I collect a lot of these old sketchbooks and published sketchbooks, and I would go back and look through them. It was really fun. And it's kind of a way to inspire, yourself in different directions. And most of the books that I talk about, you can buy. So, you can have your own copy of them. Some of them were just one-of-a-kind things that I happened to have access to, but that was nice. What else? Magdalena asks, why is it I love other people's mistakes and hate mine? I understand that. You know why? Because, all right, this is my theory, one of my theories, many theories about mistakes. I should write a book, a really unsuccessful, unpopular book about mistakes. But my thought about mistakes is that, particularly when it comes to drawing, you sit down and you say, hey, let me draw that chair. And then there's something about the chair that kind of maybe grabbed you, but you don't really think about it, like why that chair? Something cool about it. So you sit down and you just start drawing. And when you start drawing, you maybe forgot about what it was that you'd intended, right? Or maybe you are thinking about it and you're saying, okay, I have this almost vision in my mind of that finished drawing of the chair. Then you start drawing, and as you're drawing, you're making discoveries. You're making mistakes. You're reacting to the mistakes that you've made, misjudgments. You rushed into something. You drew one line a bit too quickly, a bit too long. The angle wasn't quite right. You go back, you correct it, or you don't correct it, and you do 3 other lines that relate to that first line, and suddenly you're off on some wild journey that has nothing to do with your initial intention, right? And so you continue to follow those down, and then you start to get a bit anxious, and you start to not make commitments to things and start doing multiple lines and squiggly, scratchy things like I just showed you I was doing. And then eventually you run out of steam, and then you look at the drawing and you go, what the hell? Like, this has nothing to do with what I planned, right? You had this plan, this vision of this drawing of a chair in your mind. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong camera. You had this vision of what it should look like, and it doesn't look like that. Okay? So you know that you plan to travel from here to New York. And then you suddenly found yourself in Philadelphia. And you said, what the hell? This doesn't look like New York. That doesn't look like the Empire State Building. What is that bell over there? And it's cracked. And what is that statue of Sylvester Stallone's doing there? It's supposed to be the Statue of Liberty. It's supposed to be this and supposed to be that, and it's nothing like what you thought it was going to be like. And so instead of saying, wow, Philadelphia, like this is the place I ended up, not bad, you say, I'm lost. This is hopeless. I can't even find my way to New York. And when I get there, it doesn't look anything like I thought. Do you hear what I'm saying? Now, if somebody else is in Philadelphia and you come upon them, you go like, great, they're from Philadelphia. That's where they live. Now, you don't know how they got there. But you don't really think about that. You just think about the fact that they're in Philadelphia. They're in this place where they did this drawing. This is where they ended up. But you don't know how they got there, and you don't know how they feel about it. So therefore, you're reacting just to Philadelphia, this drawing that is not New York. So that's the problem. The problem is that you know too much. And the problem is that you don't know enough to let go of that knowledge that you have. So think about that next time you do it. Give yourself a break and forget about where you thought you were going to go and look at where you are. Concentrate on the now. Focus on your journey rather than on the destination. So the fact that you thought that you were going to be able to take your picture in front of the Chrysler Building shouldn't stop you from enjoying what's the big thing in Philadelphia where they signed the Declaration of Independence? Anyway, Independence Hall. It's different. It's different, but it's perfectly valid. Okay? So stop the judging, stop the anticipation and expectation. Because here's another thing, that you'll take that drawing that you did and you'll put it away and you'll come back to it months, years from now, and you'll have forgotten that you were planning to go to New York. And you'll go, hey, nice drawing of Philadelphia. You'll have forgotten. You'll be able to look at your own work through the eyes of a stranger. And that is something that as an artist you can also cultivate. That's one of the reasons that, I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but artists will often use mirrors and even reducing, the opposite of a magnifying glass, reducing glasses to look at their work, because it gives them a different perspective than the one that they were standing in when they were drawing. So if you look at something upside down, if you look at something from a distance, your perspective shifts and you suddenly go, oh, not bad. Distance can be all kinds of things. Distance can be time. Distance can be space. Distance can be perspective. So you can just distance yourself from what you're doing, distance yourself from all the decisions that you made. And if you want to evaluate the journey that you've taken and the destination that you've reached, do it from a distance. So that would be my suggestion to you, is be here now, look carefully at what you're looking at and what you're drawing, and then step back. And only then decide whether or not to evaluate it. Or better yet, you know what? It doesn't really matter. The drawing doesn't really matter. It's the journey that matters. The drawing is just the postcard you sent home. But the memories and the pleasures and the experience that you had are the real point. So anyway, if you're still with me, you're still drawing, then I hope that was of some value to you. All right, good. Well, thank you for joining me for this Draw With Me. We're going to try and keep Draw With Me's. They're not parties. They're not endless going on until you stagger home kinds of events. I'm going to try and keep them focused and make sure that we get to do some drawing. The real point of this whole thing is to try and do a drawing at least once a week. I would strongly urge you to do it more than once a week. But let's do it together once a week. And then, let's see where we are next week. Let's get together next Thursday and talk about what we did this week. We just talked about what we did over the last 3 months. But let's talk about what we've done this week. Come back with some drawings. Tell me about your experience. And I'll tell you about what I've been up to. And we'll do something else. We'll draw something else. But drawing, ideally, is just part of your life. It is something that you do because it's fun. It's something that you do because it's interesting and that you're learning and you're getting perspective on the world from doing it. So I would say, don't we want that in our lives? Don't we want that as much as possible, to live that kind of a life that's full of fun, discovery, and journeys, a life that is about learning about ourselves and about learning about the world? Better than, I don't know, randomly going through Facebook posts or watching the last vestiges of unwashed footage in Netflix. Do a drawing. Do another one. Spend 10 minutes, draw part of a chair, draw whatever you want. But just draw something, and let's get back together again next week and talk about it and see how we all feel about it, okay? Thanks again. See you next week.